Hello and welcome to Passive Reconnaissance Part 5, the 10th video as part of our Red Team Fundamentals mini-series. At this stage, we have discussed the most fundamental points of interest when it comes to gathering passive intelligence on a target organization. All of our efforts up to this point were mainly manual as we utilized specific tooling to enumerate specific parts of an organization, such as networks, employees, data and files. However, this manual process can often take a long time, especially when dealing with a large and well-established organization. Therefore, in this final video on passive reconnaissance, we will take a look at how we can automate this entire process via a tool known as SpiderFoot. Now, as per usual, I want to reiterate that everything we teach in our videos is purely for educational purposes. We take absolutely no responsibility for your actions. My name is Irvin Tennis, and if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like as it helps us grow. Additionally, we have a Discord server where you can join to chat, contribute, or whatever it may be. Actually, in the following weeks, we will be releasing another free course specifically designed for Red Team initial access techniques. In that course, you'll learn phishing techniques, multi-factor evasion, process injection, mark of the web evasion, and a multitude of other knowledge that is sure to expand your initial access tool belt. So to keep up to date and get the latest access, you're free to join. And I'll leave a link to the server down in the description below. That being said, let's get into the practical applications of automated OSINT gathering. Now then, if you remember the tools that we used in our previous videos, our previous passive reconnaissance videos, we utilized tools such as the harvester, DNS recon, and essentially the way we've utilized them is to gather specific information. Now, this information could have been, anything about an employee or anything about the DNS records of a particular domain. Now, those tools are very useful in the sense that, we can gather specific information for which we are seeking. But, the issue with it is that, with the many assessments that you might perform, those assessments might be large in scope, so you need an automated tool that can basically aggregate all that knowledge into one central location. Now, one specific tool for this is SpiderFoot, and SpiderFoot is very powerful. I'm not really sure if it's maintained still. I'm looking at the commits here, and it seems to be several years ago with the latest release on 2022. But the tool itself is pretty much the same. There are many different modules for which we'll get into shortly, but the main thing to note about SpiderFoot is that it integrates with just about every data source available and utilizes a range of methods for data analysis, making that data easy to navigate. Now, to put it simply, SpiderFoot is essentially a tool that allows us to perform automated reconnaissance. As you can see here, it's got a really nice, web interface. We'll get into every little feature here shortly, but as you kind of go down here, you'll be able to see here the features that it provides. It's got the latest support for Python, and as you scroll down here, you can find its use cases. Now, the use cases for SpiderFoot are abundant. You've got IP addresses, domain and subdomain harvesting as well, host name, entire networks, email addresses, phone numbers, usernames, and the list goes on. Now, as with the other tools that we've discussed, SpiderFoot provides different modules or different services for which it uses, and many of these modules actually don't require API keys to use. You can see here in the modules/integration section, it provides you with the list of the services that it implements. Then you got like a nice little description as well. And then also you can see whether the API key is free, whether it's tiered, internal, or some of them are even, commercial. But, as you have a look within its modules, you'll find that many of the APIs for which SpiderFoot interacts with, many of them are free. So typically, you don't really need to provide any API keys. You can just run it out of the box. But oftentimes, to get more enriched data, you'll be providing several more API keys. Now, one specific API key that we will provide, if we kind of go down here a little, we have VirusTotal, and we've used VirusTotal in several of our videos. But we'll be using it to essentially enrich data for every single identified IP address. Now, VirusTotal can perform more, and I believe it does. I believe it even gets reports for specific domains. But I'll leave many of these modules for you to explore, to combine together to essentially get the most abundant information that you can get. Now then, to install SpiderFoot, there are several different ways in which you can do so. Now you can do so via stable build, and essentially this is the build that I would recommend, purely because this build is quite stable. But if you're having issues with that build, you can try out the development build. It might have some more features. I'm not sure. You can check out the documentations, but we'll be sticking with the stable build. Now it's pretty simple to install it. We can just copy the commands and install it that way. So this fetches version 4 of SpiderFoot. And the second command is going to extract its contents. And then we'll also need to set up a virtual environment for Python to essentially containerize our installation. So to do so, just cd into SpiderFoot, and we've set up virtual environments several times before. You simply use the virtual env command, and then you provide it with the specific virtual environment name that you want. So after clicking enter here, you should see that a virtual environment should be created, and to actually use it now, use a source command, venv bin, and the activate script. And as you can see here, the indication that you are using the virtual environment, you'll see that we have a venv indicator at the start of our prompt. Now to actually install SpiderFoot, we'll do so through the requirements file, and essentially the requirements file contains a list of modules or the dependencies for which SpiderFoot depends on. Now as you can see here, there are 26 different modules. But we will be removing the versions from module 8 here, LXML, and we'll also be doing the same for PyYAML. Now, the reason we are doing this is because, well, at least from my perspective, I've noticed that, when I'm trying to install these two modules, the installation process fails. But I've noticed that, by removing the version information and essentially installing the most recent versions will still work as it should. So let's just save this requirements file. And what we'll need to do next is essentially install the modules. Now to install the modules, it's pretty simple. Again, we've done something like this many times before now. So we use pip3 with the install argument, and then we'll provide the R switch and the requirements file for which it needs to work. And essentially pip will install all of the modules specifically for that virtual environment that SpiderFoot operates in. So as you can see here, pressing enter, the installation should begin. Now, if you recall, we were discussing modules integrations recently, and I said that, if you want to add a specific API key for a module, you can, and it suggested that you do so. And the way you do so, you mainly have two options for it. Now you can either do this through the modules directory, which is provided directly in the source code. So if we actually cd into this, list the contents, you'll see here that we have I believe it was 200 different modules, and you'll see here every single one of these modules is essentially a Python script. Now in case you do want to add an API key this way, the way you would do so is by opening up that module. So we'll provide VirusTotal here, and if you scroll down here a little, you'll find the ops dictionary. And if you take a look here, within this dictionary, you will find a key that is named API key. And essentially all that you need to do is provide an API key that, the specific module relies on as a value. Now, this is just the one way that you can do so. I would actually recommend you do another way, and that way is through the web interface. So we'll get into that shortly, but let's actually take a look at how we can start SpiderFoot up. Now, to start SpiderFoot up is pretty simple. The way we do so is through the SF script. We take a look at its help menu here. You'll see here that it supports numerous different command line options, but in order to use the web interface, all that we need to provide is the L switch. And the L switch is pretty simple. It supports an IP address. We'll be listening locally, so this IP address will be 127.0.0.1, and then you'll also need to provide a port that you're listening on. So let's actually put this into practice. SFL 127.0.0.1, and then port 5001. So after clicking enter here, you'll see some log messages, and one of these log messages is about, SpiderFoot not containing any authentication. Now, because this is hosted locally, it's not really an issue for us. You can set up authentication and it's pretty straightforward, but I'll leave that as an exercise for you to do, after you finish this video. I've noticed that, one of the things that we've not been doing is providing you with many exercises to take on after the video is finished. So there you go. That is going to be one of your exercises throughout this video. Now, to actually get this running, we'll just copy this IP address here. And essentially we will need to paste it into our browser. And once we do so, we will be redirected to SpiderFoot. And this is where, we will be running SpiderFoot from. We can start a new scan. We can navigate to settings. You can also switch between light mode or dark mode. But before we actually take a look at all of these options and all of the, functionality that SpiderFoot provides, so let's just take a look at how we can add the API key that we were talking about earlier. Now, as I said before, you can do it through the code or through the scripts, but by navigating into settings here, you'll find a list of all of the resources for which SpiderFoot supports. And as you can see here, the ones with the padlock are ones that require API keys. So, by clicking on it, you'll see that within the settings table here, you'll be asked to provide an API key. But in our case, we will be providing an API key for VirusTotal. So as you can see here, the settings table again, within the VirusTotal API key, we would simply provide the API key as is. Now you can also configure various options for that specific module, whether you might want to, check for any affiliates for IP addresses or domains or whatever it might scan for, the maximum size of a subnet to look for the specified IP address. You can also check for co-hosted sites, and many of these options will be specific to the service that you are using. But in our case, we'll leave everything as is, because we don't really need to tinker around with the modules, so we can simply select save changes and our changes should take place. Now, another useful feature, just quickly, you can import API keys by bulk. When you do so, it requires I believe it's a JSON file, or you can also export API keys in bulk as well. Or additionally, you can reset everything to factory default. But, if you want to have a look through these settings yourself, but what we want to do is start a new scan. Now, the way we start a new scan is simply choosing the new scan option here. And once you do so, you will be provided with a set of options for which you can configure your scan to be. Now, as you can see here, we will need to provide a scan name, the target for our scan, and the type of use case or the type of assessment for which SpiderFoot will perform. Now, one of the most useful features of SpiderFoot is that you can not only provide a domain name or IP address, but you can also provide a subdomain, a Bitcoin address, an email address, or even phone number. So, there's varying levels of degree in terms of what you can or what information you can provide to essentially conduct further harvesting on. Now, for the target that we will be scanning, we'll actually use this example.com domain that is provided by SpiderFoot. So we'll provide it as a scan target, scan name, simply example. And, as I'm going to reiterate again, you should always ensure that, you have approval from the organization or from the specific client for which you might be gathering information from. Now, typically example.com, especially when you're performing passive reconnaissance, is fine. But, if you're performing anything other than passive, as we'll soon get into, there are legal boundaries which you should be aware of. And as I said previously, in some countries, passive reconnaissance and stuff like Google dorking, for which SpiderFoot performs, is illegal. But in our case, it's fine. We're going to simply use example.com. And next, we'll need to select the type of assessment that will be performed. Now, the type of assessment that you will perform will depend on the information that you want gathering. The all assessment, or get everything and anything about the target, uses all of the modules of SpiderFoot, but it can really produce some useful information of a target. Now, do keep in mind, as I said before, some of these modules might be active and might be actively fingerprinting the target. So, this is not the module that is suggested to use for passive reconnaissance. Now, you can also use Footprint, and essentially what this does is report the information about the information that the target exposes to the internet. Now, this could be the target's network perimeter, associated identities, and any other information that is obtained through a lot of web crawling and search engine use. Now you can also use investigate, and what this does is essentially perform some basic footprinting about a target when that target is deemed malicious. So this is really good for blue teams because it can query blacklists and other sources that may have information about the target's maliciousness. So you can really gather some more information about if that specific IP address or that domain is associated with any malware. But it's not the specific use case what we want to use. And the specific use case that we want to use is passive. Now what passive will do is essentially gather information using passive resources without actively fingerprinting the target. And as you can see here, the information that will be gathered will be done so without touching the target or their affiliates. Therefore, only modules that do not touch the target will be enabled. So this specific use case is really good for OSINT operations. Now you can, examine by required data. So what this means is essentially the data or the information that you want to gather on the target organization. So say for instance, we might want to find out a particular target's Bitcoin address, or maybe, if the subnet that we provide is blacklisted, or any IPs within that subnet are blacklisted. Going down here a little, you'll find a lot more information, such as getting the job title of a specific user. You've also got open TCP port, open UDP port, physical address, physical location, and the list goes on. So I suggest that you have a look through this and take a look at the information that you can gather. More specifically, that might be tailored to your needs. Now, lastly, you can do it by specific module or the specific service. And this is really good when, you might just want to use one particular or two or three or four or five particular services to conduct your enumerations. So you can see here, there's several ones we can uncheck, maybe built with C99. We can also deselect all, so this provides us with a blank canvas to select the ones we want. But in our case, we will use by use case, and having selected the passive use case, we'll simply start the scan by running the Run Scan Now button. So once we hit this button, the scan will initiate, and we will be provided with the summary dashboard. Now, one interesting thing about the summary dashboard here is that all of the information is provided in real time. So by hovering over these columns, we can start inspecting the various different elements that are found. So as you can see here, you've also got the scan status table, and essentially it provides you with a list of the total elements that were identified. So these elements might be, various different levels of information, how much of that information is unique, whether the scan is still running, and also whether the scan, encountered any errors. Now you can actually view these errors by going into the log option here, or the log section here. And as you can see here, there are several errors off the bat. So you need enabled SPF, a specific option, but did not set credentials. So as you can see here, some of these modules that are used will require API keys. Some of these errors might actually be related to a domain being offline, but by using the log section here, you can actually better understand the errors that might be occurring. Now, whilst we're here, quickly, I want to showcase that you can filter down by the specific messages or the type of log that is produced. You can also filter down by events. So let's say virus total. I'm not sure if that's actually been used yet. It has, and as you can see here, it fetched a report for a particular domain. So as you can see here, the domain is example.com. The API key is blurred out, which is useful. And you can see here the total bytes that were responded. Now, all of the juicy information is actually made available via the browse section here. And in this section is where we will find all of the information that had been harvested from the various different services for which SpiderFoot used. So kind of just quickly glancing through this, we can see that, SpiderFoot was able to extract several DNS TXT records. So you can see here, there is a record here for the example.com domain. When it was identified, take a look at some of the other things that it found. It found 6 email addresses. So you can see here we have 789 BMR example at example.com. And we saw that we could do this, using the harvester but all of this is being conducted automatically, so that's another bonus to that. So if we take a look at several more of these information points, you've got IP addresses here, unresolved internet names, any linked URLs. What's another good one? 130 raw data from APIs here. You've got 14 total usernames as well, so these might help you in assessing the different services for which that username might be registered to. If we take a look here again, there was this one, there we go. So there's a vulnerability via a third-party disclosure find here, and essentially what this provides is references to various different bug bounty platforms that may reveal the vulnerability information for which that target site might be affected by. Now, if we actually take a look at one of these, verify if we are human. Yes, I am a human. And then you can see here that example.com suffered from a cross-site scripting vulnerability. You've got the actual report here, the CVSS score, there's the vulnerable URL, and you can actually find some really useful information for, whether the same vulnerability might be applicable for another subdomain of that particular domain. So in this case, it's https, example.com, parameter XSS, but it might be vulnerable to something like blog.example.com or admin.example.com. So in that case, it might be useful to also assess that particular domain as well. But essentially, browse will be the main source of interest for you, where you will be gathering all of your intelligence from. Now, another useful section is graph, and essentially what this provides is a hierarchical overview of the findings. As you can see here, much of the information is a little bit cluttered. In that case, what we can do is force the layout by using the force layout option, and what this will do is format our output in a much more pleasing way. So as you can see here, the output is far much easier to navigate. Then we can have a look at some of this data here. So example.com, you've got several different subdomains here. You can drag and drop them, which is really useful. And essentially it provides you with a nice kind of parent to child relationship, allowing you to explore further about the specific domain via its linked instances. You can actually refresh this if you want to. You can actually save the image as well, but I find that when you do try to save the image, it's not really that useful in the sense that it doesn't actually allow you to investigate the specific entities here. So you actually do have to zoom in into something very closely for that image to be useful. So as you can see here, the latest image that we took is specific to this portion of the graph. Now, one other useful section to note is the scan settings. And what the scan settings provides is essentially an overview of the various different settings for which the scan was conducted with. So as you can see here, the global settings define whether debugging was enabled, whether we chose to override the default resolver with another DNS server, a list of internet top-level domains, and the list goes on here. So you've got various different options for which you can configure your scan prior. And to configure it prior, you can simply navigate to the settings option here, and as you can see here, the enable debugging feature, we can simply enable it to true or false. The values we can provide within its input box here. And I suggest that you have a look through some of these different settings to see how further you can expand your scans. Now, one of the more beautiful caveats of SpiderFoot is that it can take quite a while to run. Now, what I mean by beautiful there is that, although it takes a while to run, it is very comprehensive. Now, in the cases where, you've got the information that you need and say, you don't want any more information, what you can do is stop the scan. And as you can see, once the scan is stopped, an abort request will be sent to SpiderFoot in order to stop that scan. Now, in cases you want to rerun the scan, you can. You can also delete a scan. But if we take a look at the scan summary here, we can see all of the information that was gathered. Now, one of the issues that, if you do indeed choose to abort a scan, you won't be able to see its correlations. Now, a correlation is essentially the measurement of, the relationship between two or more entities. As you can see here, we have 2,416 entities, and in order for the correlations to properly calculate, the scan does need to be finished. Now, I'll leave it as an exercise for you, to run a scan, wait for the scan to finish, and then observe its correlations. But to kind of recap over what we found, if we go into the browse section again, we can see all of that harvested sweet data. So if we take a look at the data again, we can see the affiliated IP addresses with example.com. So in this case, it seems to be related to Akamai, which is a cloud computing company. So it's probably being hosted on one of their servers. We were also able to find a Bitcoin wallet address. If we keep taking a look here, we'll also be able to identify the balance of that wallet as well. So as you can see here, there is a lot of information to unpack. What I do suggest is that, you take a look at our older videos, examine when we ran the tools manually and try to correlate that information with what SpiderFoot can produce. And to put it as simplest as I can, SpiderFoot managed to not only perform those enumerations automatically, but also perform that enumeration in abundance. Now, after you're done, you're probably going to want to export the results of the scan into some file. Now you can do this by simply selecting your scan and selecting the export selected option. And you have several different options here. You've got CSV, you've got Excel, you've got JSON. You've also got a Graph Exchange XML format, which essentially provides you quite a similar result to what we've observed here. But in our case, we're simply going to export the results in spreadsheet format. So we're going to select CSV, the download will start. Upon opening the results here, we'll see all of the information laid out in its own individual columns. So as you can see here, we've got the time, then you've also got the type of scan that was performed, the module that was used, the source, and the respective data. So by zooming in here, you'll be able to see a little bit more clearly. But you'll see here, by exporting the results, we can take it offline, where we can then analyze that information further or share it with colleagues or whatever the case may be. So that covers the fundamentals of SpiderFoot, and essentially what we've discussed in this video automates all of our previous attempts and does so in a way where it even produces more information. As we now proceed, we will be taking a look at active reconnaissance, more specifically taking a look at Mmap, and we'll also be taking a look at automated vulnerability gathering using Nessus. This was a long series in terms of OSINT, but I really do hope you found it valuable. My name is Tennis, and I will see you in the next one.